The bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is still regarded as the only instance in history where nuclear weapons were used in wartime against cities, and the human cost was staggering. Within days, Japan announced its surrender, bringing an end to a conflict that had consumed much of the world. Yet even today, historians continue to debate whether the atomic bombs alone forced Japan to capitulate or whether other forces were equally, or even more, decisive. Understanding Japan's surrender requires looking at multiple pressures converging at once. These include the devastation caused by atomic weapons, the rapid Soviet entry into the war against Japan, the collapse of Japan's military capacity, internal political struggles within Tokyo, and the looming fear of a full-scale Allied invasion that could have resulted in unimaginable destruction. To grasp the full picture, it is necessary to examine the war from both American and Japanese perspectives, as well as the broader geopolitical situation unfolding in the final months of 1945. Japan entered the war with extraordinary ambitions. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, Japanese forces expanded rapidly across East Asia and the Pacific. In a remarkably short time, they seized control of vast territories, including Korea, Manchuria, large parts of China, Hong Kong, Malaya, Singapore, the Philippines, Indonesia, Burma, and numerous Pacific islands. This expansion was driven by a desire to secure natural resources and establish what was called the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, a concept that was presented as regional unity but functioned in practice as imperial domination. At its height, the Japanese Empire controlled territories containing a significant portion of the world's population and resources. The speed of this expansion shocked Western powers, many of whom were already weakened by the ongoing war in Europe. However, Japan's early success masked a critical vulnerability. It lacked the industrial base and resource independence needed to sustain a prolonged global war, especially against an opponent like the United States. Ideologically, Japan's war effort was shaped by a combination of militarism, nationalism, and state Shinto beliefs. The emperor was considered divine, a living descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu, and this belief system reinforced absolute loyalty to the state. Over time, military leaders integrated traditional concepts, such as the samurai code of Bushido, into modern warfare culture. Bushido emphasized loyalty, honor, courage, and self-sacrifice, and in wartime Japan it was transformed into an ideology that discouraged surrender and glorified death in battle. This mindset had profound consequences. Japanese soldiers were often trained to view surrender as dishonorable, sometimes even worse than death. This contributed to fierce resistance in battles across the Pacific, where Allied forces frequently encountered defenders who fought to the last man. In many cases, Japanese troops launched banzai charges or engaged in underground resistance, even when defeat was inevitable. Later in the war, this ideology also contributed to the emergence of kamikaze attacks, where pilots deliberately crashed aircraft into enemy ships. From the American perspective, the war in the Pacific was both militarily and psychologically brutal. After early Japanese victories, the United States gradually turned the tide through industrial strength and strategic planning. American production capacity became one of the decisive factors of the war. Factories produced enormous numbers of aircraft, ships, tanks, and supplies, allowing the United States not only to match but overwhelm Japanese forces over time. Key battles such as Midway marked turning points, after which Japan increasingly shifted to defensive operations. The United States adopted an island-hopping strategy, bypassing heavily fortified positions and capturing strategically important islands to move closer to Japan. Battles in places like Guadalcanal, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa were extremely costly, with fierce resistance and heavy casualties on both sides. As the United States advanced, it also faced a difficult strategic question: how to end the war quickly without an invasion of Japan's main islands, which was expected to be extremely costly. Japanese defenses were being prepared on a massive scale, and intelligence suggested that civilian and military resistance would be unprecedented. This led to three major considerations within American leadership. The first was continued strategic bombing. Under General Curtis LeMay, the United States shifted from precision bombing to area bombing campaigns targeting Japanese cities. Incendiary raids on cities such as Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya caused immense destruction, killing tens of thousands and leaving millions homeless. The March 1945 firebombing of Tokyo alone resulted in one of the deadliest air raids in history, with vast sections of the city destroyed in a single night. The second option was naval blockade. The United States submarine campaign had already severely restricted Japan's access to oil, food, and raw materials. A complete blockade could have gradually starved the country into submission. However, this approach raised ethical concerns, as it would have resulted in mass civilian suffering and potentially millions of deaths over time. The third option was a direct invasion, known as Operation Downfall. This plan involved two major phases: an initial invasion of Kyushu followed by a larger assault on Honshu, including Tokyo. Military planners estimated extremely high casualties on both sides. American losses could have reached hundreds of thousands, while Japanese casualties, including civilians, could have been far higher due to both combat and planned civilian resistance. Japanese preparations for invasion were extensive. The military planned to mobilize millions of civilians, including men, women, and even teenagers, many of whom would be armed with improvised weapons. The strategy relied heavily on the idea of fighting to the death rather than surrendering. Kamikaze units were expanded, and coastal defenses were strengthened in anticipation of the expected Allied landing. Within this context, the atomic bomb emerged as a new and decisive factor. The Manhattan Project had developed nuclear weapons in secret, and by August 1945, the United States was ready to deploy them. The bombings of Hiroshima on August 6 and Nagasaki on August 9 caused catastrophic destruction in seconds. Entire cities were leveled, tens of thousands died instantly, and many more suffered from radiation effects in the following weeks and months. At almost the same time, another critical development took place. The Soviet Union declared war on Japan and launched a massive invasion of Japanese-held territory in Manchuria. This event is often considered just as strategically important as the atomic bombings. Japan had long hoped that the Soviet Union might act as a mediator to negotiate peace with the United States. Instead, the Soviet entry destroyed that possibility and opened a new front that Japan was completely unprepared to resist. Inside Japan's leadership, these events triggered a severe crisis. The Supreme War Council was deeply divided between those who wanted to continue fighting and those who recognized that further resistance was impossible. The military leadership feared surrender due to ideological commitments and concerns over national honor, while some civilian officials and even members of the imperial court began to push for acceptance of Allied terms. Emperor Hirohito ultimately played a decisive role. Although he was traditionally seen as a symbolic figure, in this moment he intervened directly, supporting the decision to surrender. This intervention was extraordinary within Japan's political structure and reflected the severity of the situation facing the country. Even after the decision to surrender was reached, resistance did not entirely disappear. A group of junior military officers attempted a coup in Tokyo on the night before the emperor's surrender announcement. They attempted to seize the imperial palace and destroy recordings of the emperor's message to prevent it from being broadcast. However, the coup failed, and the surrender proceeded as planned. Japan officially announced its surrender shortly afterward, bringing World War II to an end. The reasons behind this decision were not singular but layered. The atomic bombings demonstrated unprecedented destructive power. The Soviet invasion eliminated diplomatic options and created a new military threat. The conventional bombing campaign and blockade had already crippled Japan's infrastructure and economy. Finally, internal political pressure and the emperor's intervention helped tip the balance toward surrender. In the end, Japan's surrender was the result of a convergence of catastrophic military pressure, strategic collapse, political division, and the realization that continued resistance would lead not just to defeat, but to the potential destruction of the nation itself.